The golden light of crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors as Michael Hartford watched from the periphery of the ballroom. The charity gala was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos swirling across the dance floor. As CEO of Hartford Technologies, Michael had written the check that had secured his company as the evening's primary sponsor. Yet he felt strangely disconnected from the celebration unfolding before him. Michael adjusted his position in his wheelchair, the smooth titanium frame barely making a sound, as he shifted to better observe the festivities. 3 years had passed since the car accident that had severed his spinal cord, but moments like these still carried the sharp edge of what he'd lost. Before the accident, he had been the one pulling partners onto dance floors, moving with the confident grace that had defined much of his life. "Mr. Hartford, can I get you anything?" James, his personal assistant, materialized beside him with practiced discretion. "I'm fine, James. Enjoy yourself." "That's an order." Michael smiled, but his eyes betrayed his melancholy as they drifted back to the dancers. At 38, Michael had rebuilt much of his life after the accident. Hartford Technologies had flourished under his leadership, expanding into medical technology that had revolutionized patient care. His personal life, however, remained a carefully managed solitude. Dating had become a minefield of uncomfortable pity, insincere interest in his fortune, or well-meaning but suffocating concern. It was easier to throw himself into work than navigate that emotional terrain. Across the room, Samantha Sam Mitchell was regretting her decision to attend the gala. As a pediatric physical therapist at Hartford Children's Hospital, she had received a complimentary invitation, and her colleagues had insisted she deserved a night out. Finding a babysitter for her 10-year-old son Jake had been challenging enough. But now she stood awkwardly in a borrowed dress, clutching a champagne flute and feeling painfully out of place among Boston's elite. "You look like you're planning an escape route," a warm voice remarked beside her. Sam turned to find Dr. Catherine Wilson, the hospital's chief of pediatrics, smiling knowingly. "That obvious?" Sam laughed, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "The hospital staff corner is over there." Catherine pointed to a small cluster of familiar faces. "Safety in numbers." "But first," she paused, her gaze focused across the room, "have you met Michael Hartford yet?" "The man himself?" Sam followed Catherine's gaze to the handsome man in the wheelchair, observing the dancers. She'd seen his photos in the hospital halls and company newsletters, but in person, there was something compelling about his presence, a quiet intensity that the photographs hadn't captured. "No, I haven't had the pleasure," Sam replied. "Come on," Catherine said, taking her arm. "He's not nearly as intimidating as the business magazines make him out to be." Before Sam could protest, Catherine was guiding her across the ballroom. Michael looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from distant contemplation to polite interest. Up close, Sam noticed the striking blue of his eyes. The strong line of his jaw softened slightly by the hint of a 5 o'clock shadow. "Michael, I'd like you to meet Samantha Mitchell, one of our most talented physical therapists," Catherine said. "Sam, Michael Hartford." "It's an honor, Mr. Hartford," Sam said, extending her hand. "Your support has made an incredible difference in our pediatric rehabilitation program." Michael took her hand, his grip firm and warm. "The honor is mine, Ms. Mitchell, and please, call me Michael. Then you must call me Sam," she smiled, feeling unexpectedly at ease. Their conversation flowed naturally as Catherine was pulled away by another colleague. Sam shared stories of her young patient's progress, and Michael listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that revealed his deep understanding of the hospital's work. There was no trace of the aloof corporate titan she had expected. "So what brought you into physical therapy?" Michael asked, steering his wheelchair slightly to avoid a passing waiter. "My son Jake," Sam answered. "He was born with cerebral palsy. Watching his early therapists work with him, seeing how they changed his life, our lives, I knew that's what I wanted to do for other families." Something shifted in Michael's expression, a newfound respect, perhaps a recognition of a kindred spirit who understood challenge intimately. "How old is Jake now?" 10 going on 30, Sam laughed. "Too smart for his own good and obsessed with robotics and engineering. Your company's STEM program at the hospital has been his favorite activity for months." Michael's face lit up. "The Thursday afternoon sessions?" I've heard great things about that group. The orchestra transitioned to a slower melody, and more couples drifted onto the dance floor. Sam noticed how Michael's gaze followed them, a fleeting shadow crossing his features before he masked it with a smile. In that moment, something impulsive and unexpected stirred within Sam. Perhaps it was the champagne, or the rare night of freedom, or simply the genuine connection she felt with this man, who seemed both powerful and vulnerable simultaneously. "Be my date tonight," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. Michael looked startled. "Excuse me?" Sam felt her cheeks flush but pressed on. "Everyone else is caught up in business networking, or impressing each other. I'm just a single mum in a borrowed dress and you're—" She gestured to his wheelchair with refreshing directness. "Watching everyone else dance. So let's be each other's date for the evening. No agendas, no expectations." For a moment, Michael simply stared at her, and Sam feared she'd overstepped catastrophically. Then something remarkable happened, he laughed. Not the polite chuckle of a CEO humoring an employee, but a genuine laugh that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "Samantha Mitchell," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "That might be the most honest invitation I've received in years." The evening transformed after that. They found a quiet corner with a view of both the dance floor and the Boston skyline. Michael ordered drinks and appetizers that weren't on the official menu, but appeared nonetheless. They talked about Jake's latest robotics project, the challenges of navigating Boston's snowy sidewalks in a wheelchair, and their shared love of classic films. When Sam mentioned her struggle to find appropriate physical activities for Jake, Michael's eyes lit up with an idea he wasn't quite ready to share. As midnight approached, Sam realized she needed to relieve her babysitter. When she explained, Michael immediately offered his driver to take her home. "Tonight was unexpected," he said as they waited for the car. "In the best possible way." "For me too," Sam replied. She hesitated, then added, "Jake's participating in a science fair at the hospital next Saturday. It's nothing fancy, but if you're not busy—" "I'll be there," Michael said, with a certainty that made her believe him. Neither realized they were being observed by James, whose concerned expression suggested complications ahead, nor by Catherine Wilson, whose knowing smile hinted at matchmaking intentions. And certainly, neither could have predicted how their impulsive connection would soon be tested by forces beyond their control. The following week passed in a blur for Michael. Board meetings and quarterly projections should have dominated his thoughts, but he found himself repeatedly distracted by memories of Samantha Mitchell's candid smile. There had been something refreshingly authentic about her, no carefully calculated networking agenda, no awkward attempts to ignore his disability, just straightforward connection. "You're distracted," noted Virginia Hartford, Michael's mother and the company's former CEO, during their weekly lunch in his office. At 65, Virginia maintained both the sharp business acumen and the impeccable appearance that had made her a formidable presence in Boston's business community. "Just thinking about the Peterson contract," Michael lied, redirecting his attention to his untouched salad. Virginia's perfectly arched eyebrow indicated she wasn't fooled. "James mentioned you met someone interesting at the gala." Michael silently cursed his assistant's perceptiveness. "A physical therapist from the children's hospital. She has a son in our STEM program. And?" Virginia prompted, her tone softening slightly. "And nothing. She invited me to her son's science fair this weekend." Michael attempted nonchalance, but couldn't quite suppress a smile. Virginia leaned back, studying her son with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated countless business rivals. "The first social event you voluntarily added to your calendar in—" "How long?" "It's for the hospital program," Michael deflected, though they both knew it wasn't that simple. Virginia reached across the desk, briefly covering his hand with hers, a rare gesture of maternal affection. "Just be careful, Michael. People have agendas, especially when it comes to the Hartford name." The warning stirred a familiar cynicism in Michael. Since the accident, he'd encountered plenty of people drawn to his wealth and influence, rather than to him as a person. Still, the memory of Sam's straightforward invitation persisted. "I'll keep that in mind." Across town at Hartford Children's Hospital, Sam was finishing a therapy session with a 7-year-old recovering from orthopedic surgery when her phone chimed with a text message. She expected it to be from her neighbor Mrs. Landry, who was watching Jake after school, but instead saw an unknown number. Looking forward to Saturday. Any dietary restrictions I should know about for the post-science fair celebration? Michael Hartford. Sam nearly dropped her phone. She hadn't actually expected him to remember, let alone suggest extending the day. Who's that? Asked Kelly Bryant, a fellow therapist who'd caught Sam's surprised expression. You're blushing. Nobody, Sam answered too quickly, then relented under Kelly's skeptical stare. Fine. Remember when you and Catherine forced me to attend that gala? I sort of. Made friends with Michael Hartford. Kelly's eyes widened. The Michael Hartford? Our boss's boss's boss. That Michael Hartford? It's not a big deal, Sam insisted, though the flutter in her stomach suggested otherwise. We talked, he was nice. So I mentioned Jake's science fair, he said he might stop by. And now he's texting you about food, Kelly pointed out with growing delight. Sam, do you realize he's asking to take you and Jake to dinner? The realization hit Sam with unexpected force. Was this a date? A professional courtesy? She hadn't dated anyone seriously since Jake's father had walked out 8 years ago, claiming he hadn't signed up for raising a child with special needs. Between single motherhood and building her career, romantic relationships had seemed an unnecessary complication. I should cancel, Sam muttered, suddenly panicking. This is my boss, technically. Multiple levels removed, but still. Kelly rolled her eyes. Or you could stop overthinking and enjoy dinner with an attractive, successful man who's clearly interested in getting to know you and your son. After agonizing over her response through 2 more therapy sessions, Sam finally texted back, No allergies, but Jake is currently in a phase where he only eats foods that are scientifically interesting. Your offer is very kind. Are you sure your schedule allows it? The response came almost immediately. Scientifically interesting foods are my specialty, and I've cleared my schedule. See you Saturday at 2. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that showcases Boston at its best. Crisp air, golden sunlight, and foliage beginning to flame into brilliant colors. Jake had been up since dawn, making final adjustments to his project, a modified robotic arm designed to help people with limited mobility grasp small objects. Mom, do you think Mr. Hartford will understand the torque calculations? Jake asked, his dark curls falling into his eyes as he bent over his creation. Despite the mild cerebral palsy that affected his left side, Jake's hands moved with impressive dexterity as he tightened a small screw. I think Mr. Hartford runs a technology company, buddy. He'll probably understand better than I do, Sam answered, trying to mask her nervousness. She'd changed outfits 3 times already, finally settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that Kelly insisted brought out her eyes. But he's coming because he likes you, right? Jake asked with the direct perception that often caught Sam off guard. Mrs. Landry says he's probably sweet on you. Mrs. Landry should mind her own business, Sam muttered, though she couldn't help smiling. Mr. Hartford is coming because he supports the hospital's programs. Jake shot her a skeptical look that was eerily reminiscent of his grandmother's expression. Then why did you change your clothes so many times? Finish your project, smarty pants, Sam deflected, ruffling his hair affectionately. The science fair was held in the hospital's large atrium, transformed for the day, with rows of tables displaying projects from patients and participants in the hospital's various programs. Sam helped Jake set up his station, her eyes occasionally drifting to the entrance, despite her best efforts to appear casual. At precisely 2 o'clock, a subtle ripple of awareness moved through the room as Michael Hartford arrived. He navigated his wheelchair confidently through the space, dressed more casually than Sam had seen him at the gala, in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. What surprised her was that he wasn't alone. Beside him walked an older woman with his same striking blue eyes, her silver hair elegantly styled, her posture impeccable. Sam, Michael smiled warmly as he approached their table. This is my mother, Virginia Hartford. Mom, this is Samantha Mitchell, and... He turned his attention to Jake with genuine interest. You must be the robotics expert I've heard about. Jake straightened proudly, his usual shyness momentarily forgotten in his excitement. I'm Jake. I made a precision gripper for people who can't control their fingers very well. May I? Michael asked, gesturing to the project. For the next 15 minutes, Sam watched in amazement as Michael engaged with Jake's project with genuine enthusiasm, asking insightful questions and offering suggestions that had Jake practically bouncing with excitement. Virginia observed quietly, her initially reserved expression softening as she watched her son and Jake bond over engineering principles. "Your son is remarkably talented," Virginia commented to Sam. "Has he always been interested in assistive technology?" "Since he was old enough to understand how his own adaptive devices worked," Sam explained. "He's determined to design better solutions for kids like himself." Something shifted in Virginia's assessment of Sam, a subtle but perceptible warming. "Admirable. We need more innovators who understand the practical applications of their work." As Jake demonstrated his project to other visitors, Michael steered his wheelchair closer to Sam. "I hope you don't mind that I brought my mother. She was interested in the program, and I thought—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Well, family is important." The gesture touched Sam deeply. Michael wasn't just making a professional appearance. He was introducing her to someone significant in his life. "I'm glad to meet her. Jake never got to know his grandparents. My parents passed away before he was born, and his father's family isn't in the picture." A shadow of anger crossed Michael's face at the implied abandonment, quickly replaced by understanding. "Their loss," he said simply, glancing at Jake with evident admiration. As they toured the other projects, Sam noticed something she hadn't seen at the gala: the way Michael interacted with the children, especially those with mobility issues. There was a natural empathy in his approach, a way of meeting them at eye level, and speaking to them directly rather than through their parents or caregivers. When one nervous young girl in leg braces struggled to explain her project, Michael shared a brief story about his own first weeks of rehabilitation that had her giggling and relaxed within minutes. By the time the awards were announced, with Jake receiving honorable mention for technical innovation, Sam was seeing Michael in an entirely new light. This wasn't just the charismatic CEO she'd met at the gala. This was a man with depth, compassion, and an authentic connection to the challenges these children faced. "Dinner to celebrate," Michael suggested as they prepared to leave. "I know a place that serves molecular gastronomy desserts. Scientifically interesting enough for you, Jake? Like the food that looks like one thing but tastes like another?" Jake asked excitedly. "I saw that on YouTube." As they headed toward the exit, James appeared, his expression tense. "Mr. Hartford, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a situation with the Reynolds partnership. They're threatening to pull out unless you personally intervene." Michael's expression darkened momentarily before he regained his composure. "Sam, I'm so sorry. Go," she said, understanding immediately. "Business emergencies don't wait. We can reschedule." The disappointment in Jake's face was unmistakable, and Michael noticed it too. He hesitated, torn between responsibilities, then made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. James set up a video conference in the car. "I'll handle Reynolds remotely. Tonight I have a dinner engagement that can't be postponed." He turned to Virginia. "Mom, will you join us? I think you and Jake have more robotics discussions ahead." Virginia's surprised expression suggested this deviation from duty was uncharacteristic for her son. "I'd be delighted," she answered, studying Michael with newfound curiosity. As they left the hospital together, Jake chattering excitedly about experimental cuisine, Virginia asking perceptive questions about his project, and Michael exchanging a private smile with Sam, none of them noticed Dr. Catherine Wilson watching from a distance. Her satisfaction at the unfolding connection mingled with concern as she recognized another figure, observing the group with calculated interest. Bradley Winters, Hartford Technologies' ambitious VP of Operations, whose expression suggested the evening's developments were far from welcome. "The circuit board needs to be smaller," Jake insisted, his brow furrowed in concentration as he and Michael hunched over the workshop table in Michael's home. 3 weeks had passed since the science fair, and weekend afternoons at the Hartford estate had become a new tradition. What had begun as a follow-up to Jake's project had evolved into a genuine mentorship, with Michael guiding Jake through increasingly sophisticated engineering concepts. "If we reduce it further, we risk overheating," Michael countered, though his eyes sparkled with pride at Jake's ambition. "What if we approach it differently? Instead of shrinking the components, we could redistribute them along this axis. Sam watched from the doorway, a mug of tea warming her hands. The sprawling Hartford estate had initially intimidated her, the sweeping driveway, the security gate, the historic colonial architecture that spoke of old Boston money. Yet within these imposing walls, Michael had created spaces of surprising warmth. His workshop, adapted for wheelchair accessibility, was a marvel of thoughtful design that allowed him to pursue the hands-on engineering work he'd always loved. "They're two peas in a pod," Virginia remarked, joining Sam with her own cup of tea. The elder Hartford had become an unexpected ally, her initial reserve melting as she witnessed the genuine connection forming between her son, Sam, and Jake. "Jake's never had a male figure take such interest in him," Sam admitted. "His father couldn't handle a child who wasn't perfect, and my dad passed away before Jake was born." Virginia's expression hardened slightly. "Some men lack the character to face challenges. Others, like my Michael, are forged by them." She glanced at Sam with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I worried after the accident that he'd never find his way back to joy. He survived, he rebuilt the business, but something was missing." Her gaze returned to Michael and Jake, softening. Until recently, the weight of Virginia's words settled on Sam. What had begun as an impulsive invitation at a charity gala had steadily deepened into something neither she nor Michael had anticipated. Their dinner after the science fair had extended into hours of conversation, which led to a Sunday picnic in the Boston Public Garden, then regular family dinners that increasingly felt like coming home. For all the joy of these developing relationships, however, Sam couldn't ignore the complications. The significant differences in their circumstances created unavoidable tensions. Last week, when Jake's specialized wheelchair needed repairs, Michael had immediately arranged for the top technician in Boston to address it, a gesture both touching and overwhelming in its ease. Sam's instinct to maintain independence warred with her appreciation for his generosity. "Earth to Samantha," Virginia prompted with a knowing smile. "The board meeting situation is weighing on you," Sam sighed. That morning's Boston Business Journal had featured a prominent article questioning Michael's recent distracted leadership, citing anonymous sources within Hartford Technologies, who suggested his new personal relationships were affecting company performance. Though no names were mentioned, the timing made the targets clear. "I don't want to cause problems for him," Sam admitted. The article wasn't subtle. Virginia's expression turned shrewd. "Bradley Winters has been angling for Michael's position since before the accident. He's opportunistic, not particularly creative, but dangerously ambitious." She studied Sam carefully. "The question is, are you going to let a manipulative article frighten you away?" Before Sam could respond, her phone rang. The hospital. She answered quickly, her expression transitioning from concern to professional focus. When she hung up, Michael and Jake had joined them, both looking questioningly at her. "Emergency at work," she explained, already gathering her things. "One of my young patients had a setback in recovery. They need all hands on deck." "I can drive you," Michael offered immediately. "And I'll stay with Jake," Virginia added, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Sam hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Within minutes, they were in Michael's specially equipped SUV, navigating toward the hospital, with an urgency that highlighted the deepening integration of their lives. "I'm sorry about the article," Michael said once they were underway, addressing the tension Sam had been trying to conceal. "Bradley's tactics are predictable, if nothing else." "You knew it was him?" Sam asked, surprised by Michael's certainty. The board meeting he referenced was confidential. Only 7 people knew about the Reynolds situation, and only Bradley would benefit from painting me as distracted. Michael's hands tightened slightly on the adaptive driving controls. "What bothers me isn't his ambition. It's that he'd use you and Jake as pawns." The protective edge in his voice stirred something in Sam, a warmth that both comforted and frightened her with its intensity. Over the past weeks, she'd been careful to maintain emotional guardrails, reminding herself that despite their connection, their worlds remained fundamentally different. Michael operated in rarefied circles of wealth and influence she could scarcely imagine, while she juggled mortgage payments and worried about Jake's future medical expenses. "Maybe he has a point," Sam said quietly. "So your life was perfectly structured before we complicated it." Michael pulled the car into the hospital's emergency entrance and turned to face her, his expression surprisingly fierce. "My life was perfectly empty before you and Jake complicated it. Don't let Bradley or anyone else tell you otherwise." The simple declaration lodged in Sam's heart as she rushed into the hospital, carrying her through the intense hours that followed as she worked with her team to help a 5-year-old girl regain stability after a serious fall had compromised months of rehabilitation. Progress. It was nearly midnight when Sam emerged from the hospital, exhausted but satisfied that her patient was stable. She was surprised to find Michael's SUV still in the parking lot, and even more surprised to see him awake, working on a tablet computer despite the late hour. "You didn't have to wait," she said, sliding into the passenger seat with a grateful sigh. "I wanted to," he answered simply. "Jake's fine. He and my mother were making cookies and watching documentaries about marine biology when I last checked in. Apparently, he's decided to add ocean conservation to his list of interests." Sam smiled despite her fatigue. "Your mother's been wonderful with him. I didn't expect that." "Mom recognizes genuine talent and integrity when she sees it," Michael replied, navigating out of the parking lot. "She was the same way in business, could spot authentic value beneath all the noise and posturing." They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Michael spoke again, his tone more hesitant than Sam had ever heard from him. "I've been offered a speaking engagement at a tech conference in California next month. 3 days in San Francisco. I'd like you and Jake to come with me." The invitation hung in the air between them, weighted with implications beyond a simple trip. "Michael, I can't just take time off with such short notice. And Jake has school, and the conference organizers specifically asked if I'd participate in a panel on adaptive technology for children," Michael continued, his eyes fixed on the road. "They've seen the prototypes Jake and I have been working on. It would be educational for him, and the hospital would consider it professional development for you." He hesitated. "But that's not the real reason I'm asking." "What is?" Sam asked, though she suspected she already knew. "I'm falling in love with you, Samantha," Michael said, the words both careful and certain. "And I think I'm falling in love with that remarkable son of yours, too. I want to see if this, us, works beyond the bubble we've created here." Sam's heart raced, emotions colliding, joy and fear, hope and doubt. "Michael, our lives are so different. You and I'm just—" "If you say just a physical therapist, I might have to pull this car over," Michael interrupted with unexpected intensity. "You're the woman who saw me, really saw me, when everyone else was seeing a wheelchair or a bank account, who treats my disability with neither pity nor awkward avoidance, who's raising an extraordinary child with courage and grace." His voice softened. "You're not just anything, Sam." The raw honesty in his voice broke through her defenses. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of loving you. That part's already happening whether I planned it or not. I'm scared of disrupting Jake's stability, of the scrutiny, of not fitting into your world." "Then let's find out in San Francisco," Michael suggested, reaching for her hand as they stopped at a red light. "Neutral territory. No Hartford legacy, no hospital hierarchy. Just us figuring out if what we feel is strong enough to build something on." The light turned green, and as they accelerated forward, Sam made her decision. "Okay, California it is." What neither of them could have anticipated was how quickly their tentative plans would unravel. The following morning, while Sam prepared breakfast and Jake chatted about the robotics workshop Michael had promised to take him to, her doorbell rang insistently. Opening the door, Sam found herself facing a sharply dressed woman with a press badge and a predatory smile. "Samantha Mitchell." "Cassandra Reeves, Boston Sentinel. I was hoping for a comment about your relationship with Michael Hartford and how it relates to the lucrative new contract your hospital department recently received from Hartford Technologies." Sam's blood ran cold. "Excuse me." "Sources inside Hartford Technologies suggest Mr. Hartford fast-tracked a $3 million equipment grant specifically for your department shortly after beginning your relationship," the reporter continued, recording device extended. "Do you feel there's a conflict of interest, given your romantic involvement?" "That's completely false," Sam stated, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The equipment grant was in development for over a year, long before I ever met Michael. Yet the final approval came through last week, signed personally by Mr. Hartford, rather than going through the Foundation's normal channels," Cassandra pressed. "And now there are questions about specialized treatment for your son "Get off my property," Sam interrupted, her protective instincts flaring. "And leave my son out of this." She closed the door with shaking hands, only to find Jake standing in the hallway, his expression troubled. "Mom, what's wrong?" Before she could formulate a reassuring answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Wilson. "Media calling the hospital about you and Michael." "Board emergency meeting called. Need to talk ASAP." Then came a message from Michael. "Bradley leaked the equipment grant documentation. Don't talk to anyone. My lawyer is handling it." As the implications cascaded through her mind, Sam felt the carefully constructed bridge between their worlds beginning to crumble. The phone rang again, Virginia this time, but Sam couldn't bring herself to answer. Instead, she pulled Jake into a protective embrace, struggling to reconcile the joy of the previous evening with the harsh reality of the morning. "Is Mr. Michael in trouble because of us?" Jake asked, his perceptiveness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Sam closed her eyes briefly, searching for the right words. "No, honey. Some people just don't understand that good things can happen without there being a secret reason behind them." But as her phone continued to buzz with messages and calls, Sam wondered if she'd been naive to believe that their worlds could merge without consequences. The foundations were shaking, and she had a sinking feeling that the true test of their relationship wasn't going to be a trip to San Francisco. It was going to be weathering the storm that had just broken over their heads. The conference room at Hartford Technology's headquarters fell silent as Michael finished speaking, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his shoulders. Around the polished mahogany table, board members exchanged glances ranging from supportive to skeptical. Bradley Winters sat directly across from Michael, his carefully neutral expression belied by the calculating gleam in his eyes. "Let me be clear," Michael concluded, hands folded calmly before him. "The equipment grant for Hartford Children's Hospital was initiated 14 months ago, with full documentation and proper vetting. My personal relationship with Ms. Mitchell began 3 months ago, well after the grant was already in progress. Any insinuation of impropriety is not only false, but potentially libelous." "Nevertheless," Bradley interjected smoothly, "the perception issue remains. The timing of the final approval, coming so soon after your involvement with Ms. Mitchell became public, raises questions we can't ignore." "Questions you helped plant in the press, Bradley?" Virginia Hartford's voice cut through the room like a steel blade. Though retired from her CEO position, she retained her board seat and the formidable presence that had built Hartford Technologies into an industry leader. Bradley's practiced smile didn't waver. "I'm merely concerned about protecting the company's reputation and Michael's legacy. These allegations, regardless of their source, could damage investor confidence." "Enough," interrupted Thomas Grayson, the board's longest-serving member and Michael's godfather. "I've reviewed the grant documentation. Everything was handled appropriately, if perhaps expedited in the final stages. What concerns me more is the leak of confidential information to the press. That represents a serious breach of fiduciary duty." All eyes returned to Bradley, whose composure flickered momentarily before he regained control. "I agree completely. Whoever leaked those documents should be identified and removed from the company." The hypocrisy was breathtaking, Michael thought, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "I've already authorized IT to conduct a thorough audit of document access. In the meantime, the legal team has prepared statements refuting the false allegations and demanding retractions from the publications that printed them." "And what about Ms. Mitchell?" Bradley pressed. "The hospital board is reportedly conducting their own review of potential conflicts of interest." "How do you plan to address that?" The question struck its intended target. Michael had spent the past 72 hours navigating the professional fallout while being unable to reach Sam, who had requested space to handle her own professional crisis. Her silence felt like a physical ache, amplified by his worry for Jake, who must be confused and upset by the sudden disruption. "Ms. Mitchell is a dedicated healthcare professional whose reputation is being unfairly tarnished," Michael answered evenly. "The hospital board will reach the same conclusion we have, that no ethical breaches occurred. Now, if there's no further business regarding the grant situation, I suggest we move to the quarterly projections." 2 hours later, Michael wheeled into his office to find James waiting with a concerned expression. "How bad was it?" Bradley overplayed his hand. Michael replied, moving to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. The board saw through his concerned colleague act, especially after Thomas presented the email trail showing Bradley had accessed the grant documents just before they were leaked. Will they remove him? Not yet. Without absolute proof, it would look like retaliation. Michael's reflection in the glass looked more tired than he cared to admit. Any word from Sam? James hesitated. Nothing direct, but Dr. Wilson called. The Hospital Ethics Committee completed their review and found no evidence of impropriety. Ms. Mitchell has been fully cleared, but he trailed off. But what? Michael pressed, turning from the window. She's requested a temporary reassignment to the satellite clinic in Brookline. Dr. Wilson thought you should know. The news hit Michael like a physical blow. Brookline was only 15 minutes away, but the symbolic distance felt vast. Sam was retreating, creating space between them, between her son and the Hartford world that had suddenly revealed its sharp edges. Should I arrange the car to take you home? James asked gently. Michael shook his head. I need to make a stop first. Across town, Sam was packing equipment at the hospital, preparing for her first day at the Brookline clinic. The reassignment had been her idea, a tactical retreat to let the media storm subside. Though the ethics committee had cleared her completely, whispers and curious glances followed her through the hospital corridors. You don't have to do this, Catherine said, helping Sam inventory therapeutic tools. The committee's finding was unequivocal. No one who matters believes you did anything wrong. It's not about what people believe, Sam replied, checking items off her list with more force than necessary. It's about protecting Jake. Yesterday, a reporter followed him and his after-school aide to the park. He's 10 years old, Catherine. He shouldn't have to deal with this. Catherine studied her friend carefully. And what about Michael? Are you protecting yourself from him too? The question struck too close to Sam's tangled emotions. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of meetings with hospital administrators, calls from journalists, and worst of all, Jake's confused questions about why they couldn't see Michael anymore. She'd maintained professional composure through it all, but beneath that facade, heartbreak and doubt had taken root. He lives in a world where people weaponize relationships, Sam said finally. Where caring about someone makes you vulnerable to people like Bradley Winters. I can handle scrutiny, but I won't subject Jake to that kind of environment. Have you told Michael this? Catherine asked. I sent him a message explaining that I needed space to sort things out professionally. Sam avoided her friend's gaze. He's respected that. Respecting your boundaries isn't the same as agreeing with your decision, Catherine pointed out. That man loves you, Sam, and from what I've seen, he loves Jake too. Sam closed the supply case with a decisive click. Love isn't always enough. As she signed out at the reception desk, the hospital's main entrance slid open, and a familiar figure wheeled in. Michael looked different than she'd ever seen him, unshaven. His usually impeccable attire replaced by jeans and a rumpled button-down, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights that matched her own. Sam, he said simply, stopping a respectful distance away. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Michael, I'm just finishing up here. I know, Dr. Wilson told me. He gestured toward the small courtyard adjacent to the lobby. 5 minutes, please? The quiet request dissolved her resolve to maintain distance. Sam nodded, following him to a secluded bench beneath a maple tree beginning to turn gold with autumn. The hospital cleared you, Michael began. Yes, there was nothing to find. Sam's voice came out more defensive than she'd intended, and our board reached the same conclusion. Michael leaned forward slightly. Bradley's being investigated for the leak. He'll likely resign before they can fire him. Sam absorbed this information, feeling oddly hollow at the vindication. That's good, is it? Michael challenged gently. Because you're still transferring to Brookline. You're still pulling away. The direct confrontation broke through Sam's carefully maintained composure. What did you expect, Michael? That we'd just weather this storm and everything would go back to normal? A reporter followed my son. Colleagues I've worked with for years suddenly questioned my integrity. Your board members treated me like I was a gold digger who seduced you for hospital funding. And I hate all of that, Michael replied, his voice raw with emotion. I hate that you and Jake experienced any of it. But running away isn't the solution. I'm not running away, Sam protested. I'm protecting my family. We were becoming a family, Michael said quietly. The simple statement hung in the air between them. weighted with all the possibilities that seemed to be slipping away. Sam looked down at her hands, fighting tears. Your world is too complicated, too exposed. Jake needs stability, not scrutiny. Jake needs people who love him, Michael countered, who see his brilliance and encourage it, who treat him with dignity and respect. He reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she allowed the contact. And you deserve someone who sees you completely and loves everything they see. Michael, no, please listen, he interrupted gently. I've had 3 days to think about this. Bradley saw our relationship as a vulnerability he could exploit, because that's how he views the world, as a series of strategic advantages and liabilities. But he was wrong about the most fundamental thing. What's that? Sam asked despite herself. Loving you and Jake isn't my weakness. It's my strength. Michael's blue eyes held hers steadily. Before I met you, I was existing, not living, running the company, doing the expected things, but walled off from real connection. You changed that with 7 simple words. Be my date tonight. You saw the man, not the wheelchair or the balance sheet. The memory of that first evening flooded back, the impulsive invitation, the genuine laughter that had transformed his face. I've spent 3 years adapting to life after the accident, Michael continued, learning to navigate a world that wasn't designed for me. But the hardest adaptations weren't physical. They were letting go of what I thought my life would be, and embracing what it could become instead. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. I'm asking you to adapt with me now. Not to run from the challenges, but to face them together. Sam felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not for myself, but for Jake. Have you asked Jake what he wants? Michael's question was gentle but pointed. Before Sam could respond, a familiar voice called out, Mom! Mr. Michael! They turned to see Jake hurrying across the courtyard, Virginia Hartford following at a more sedate pace. Jake's face was alight with excitement, all traces of the past day's confusion replaced by animated enthusiasm. We've been working on it all day, he announced, reaching them slightly out of breath. Show them, Mrs. Virginia. Virginia approached with a tablet computer, her usual reserved expression softened by genuine warmth. Jake had quite the insight this morning. He insisted we come show you immediately. Michael raised a questioning eyebrow at his mother, who responded with a subtle nod that communicated volumes about her evolving opinion of Sam and Jake. Jake took the tablet, fingers flying across the screen with practiced ease, despite the mild tremor in his left hand. Remember how we couldn't make the circuit board small enough for the portable version? I figured out we don't need to. We can use wireless transmission from a base unit instead. He thrust the tablet toward them, displaying a remarkably sophisticated design modification to their project. That's brilliant, Michael said, examining the schematics with growing admiration. You've completely reconceptualized the approach. Jake beamed. Then his expression turned serious. Does this mean we can keep working together? Mom said we needed to take a break, because people were saying mean things. But Mrs. Virginia explained that sometimes people get jealous when good things happen to others. Sam met Virginia's gaze over Jake's head, surprised by the unexpected alliance. I hope you don't mind, Virginia said. Jake called the house quite upset this morning. I thought today in the workshop might help him process everything. It did, Jake confirmed enthusiastically, and Mrs. Virginia showed me pictures of Mr. Michael when he was my age. He had a science fair project about solar energy that won first place. The simple normalcy of Jake's excitement created a stark contrast to the corporate and hospital politics that had dominated the past days. In the face of his unguarded joy, the manufactured scandal seemed increasingly absurd. Jake, Sam said carefully, what would you think about spending more time with Michael and Mrs. Virginia? Not just for robotics projects, but as family. Jake looked at her as if she'd asked the most obvious question in the world. Isn't that what we've been doing already? The simple observation startled a laugh from Sam, releasing tension she'd carried for days. She looked at Michael, whose expression held equal parts hope and vulnerability. What about San Francisco? He asked quietly, reminding her of the invitation that had preceded the media storm. The conference is still 2 weeks away, Virginia interjected smoothly. The media cycle will have moved on to some new scandal by then, and Bradford's resignation announcement tomorrow will redirect any remaining attention. Sam raised an eyebrow. Resignation. Virginia's smile held a hint of her formidable business acumen. Bradley was offered a clear choice: resign with a neutral recommendation or face a formal investigation for corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty. He's drafting his statement as we speak. Michael shook his head in amused disbelief. Mother, what did you do? Nothing that wasn't already in motion, Virginia replied innocently. I merely accelerated the timeline. She turned to Sam, her expression softening. My son has never been happier than these past weeks with you and Jake. I've spent a lifetime building Hartford Technologies, but what matters most is the family that carries the name forward, whatever form that family takes. The implicit blessing washed over Sam like a wave, clearing away remaining doubts. She looked at Jake, absorbed again in explaining his design modifications to Michael, who listened with genuine engagement and respect. Then she turned back to Virginia. Thank you, she said simply. Virginia nodded in acknowledgement, then tactfully suggested she and Jake explore the hospital's healing garden to give the adults privacy. As they walked away, Jake's animated chatter faded into the background. So, Michael said, taking Sam's hand again. San Francisco. Sam considered all that had transpired. The unexpected connection at the gala, the blossoming relationship, the crisis that had nearly derailed everything. Through it all, one truth had remained constant. Together they were stronger, happier, more complete. San Francisco, she agreed with a growing smile. And then, home. Together. Michael's face transformed with joy, reminiscent of that first genuine laugh that had captured her heart. Together, he echoed, the word a promise and a new beginning. 6 months later, the Boston Sentinel Society page featured a very different story about Michael Hartford and Samantha Mitchell. The small private wedding at the Hartford Estate Garden made headlines not for scandal, but for its innovative accessibility, features designed in collaboration with young Jake Mitchell, whose adaptive technology project had recently received a National Innovation Award for Young Scientists. In the photograph accompanying the article, the bride and groom were captured, not in a traditional pose but seated side by side at eye level, their joined hands resting on the wheelchair arm between them. Jake stood proudly beside them, Virginia Hartford's hand on his shoulder, all four faces alight with the unmistakable glow of family, not defined by conventional boundaries, but built on the foundation of seeing each other clearly and choosing love despite every obstacle. And in the workshop behind the main house, already a tangle of tools and projects, a framed invitation hung on the wall. Be my date tonight, it read in elegant script. Below it a simple response. Best decision I ever made.